I never thought my children would look me in the eye while plotting my death. When I found out, it wasn't through their words, but through the silence, the strange looks, and the way love turned into something calculated. That night, as my daughter's hand tightened around a syringe meant for me, I realized the truth. Blood doesn't always mean family. My name is Dorinda Blake, and this is how it all began. The house had always felt too big once my husband was gone. Its wooden beams carried every echo, every sigh, every memory of a life I once had. Now, after years of empty halls and quiet dinners, both of my children were back under the same roof. For a moment, I thought it would heal something inside me. Instead, it only reminded me how silence could be more painful than loneliness. Ethan drifted in and out like a shadow. He claimed the night shifts at the hospital kept him exhausted, and maybe that was true. But his eyes slid past mine at the breakfast table as if looking at me too long might burn him. Marissa shut herself away, her door always closed, the faint sound of drawers opening and shutting behind it. Sometimes she would emerge in the early afternoon, still in pajamas, barely acknowledging me before disappearing again. I told myself she was grieving the end of her marriage, but the distance cut me in ways I didn't let her see. Every evening, I tried to pull us together. I set the table, laid out plates, and cooked meals as if ritual alone could force life back into these rooms. More often than not, I ate alone, staring at the empty chairs while food cooled in serving bowls. The tick of the grandfather clock in the corner became company, each swing of its pendulum a reminder that the moments I wanted most, shared laughter, casual conversation, were long gone. I told myself it was enough, just having them here again, hearing their footsteps on the floorboards, even if they belonged to strangers more than to children I once knew. But the ache grew, not only in my chest, but in my body. I had been more tired lately, heavy with headaches that seemed to bloom behind my eyes without warning. Sometimes I would grip the edge of the counter when dizziness hit, breathe through it, and tell myself it was just age catching up. Still, I clung to a fragile comfort. At least they're home, I thought. That single truth softened the sharp edges of being ignored, dismissed, forgotten. I didn't need much anymore. Just their presence was enough, or so I wanted to believe. One morning, as sunlight slid weakly through the lace curtains, I moved about the living room, wiping down the coffee table, dusting the shelves. I was halfway through when I noticed something new. A dark circle had begun to spread on the ceiling above the mantel, faint at first, then blooming into a damp, ugly stain. I frowned, stepping closer, my cloth still in hand. A drop fell, landing on the polished wood below. Another followed. I called out for Ethan, raising my voice more than usual because I'd grown tired of being unheard in my own home. He came into the room reluctantly, shoulders tense, his expression impatient as though I'd pulled him away from something more important. I pointed to the watermarks, the steady drip hitting the wood. He studied it for only a second before speaking. His tone was flat, detached. "Don't call the old company again. I'll send you someone else. A guy I know. More reliable." The words should have been reassuring, but the way he said them left a hollow echo in my chest. He didn't meet my eyes, didn't ask if I was worried, didn't suggest a plan beyond that short dismissal. Then, as quickly as he'd appeared, he was gone, leaving me with the damp circle spreading wider above my head. I stood there, rag damp in my hands, staring at the slow drip onto the wood table. Something about it unsettled me, though I couldn't have explained why. Maybe it was Ethan's tone, maybe the way he hadn't let me speak, maybe just the knowledge that once water found its way in, it was only a matter of time before it destroyed what it touched. At the time, I thought it was nothing more than a small household nuisance, a repair to be taken care of and forgotten. I couldn't have known that the first drop staining my table was the beginning of a nightmare I never imagined I would live through. The next morning, just as I was finishing a second cup of coffee, a knock sounded at the front door, firm but polite. When I opened it, a man in his late 50s stood on the porch, wearing worn blue coveralls and carrying a battered metal toolbox that had clearly seen decades of work. He introduced himself simply, his voice warm and measured, and for a moment the sight of him was almost comforting, someone steady, someone practical. I stepped aside to let him in, still telling myself this was only a leak, nothing more. He glanced up at the ceiling where the stain had spread overnight, now darker and more pronounced. After a moment's inspection, he said evenly that he'd need to check the main lines below. His tone was calm, unhurried, the way people speak when they know exactly what they're doing. I led him down the narrow basement stairs, holding the railing to steady myself against another wave of dizziness. The space smelled of damp cement and stored Christmas boxes. Nothing unusual. I waited at the top of the stairs while he worked, the muffled sound of metal on metal rising from below. When he came back up, his face had changed. The friendliness was still there, but dulled, like someone who had stumbled onto something he didn't want to see. He wiped his palms on a rag before speaking. "Do you live here alone?" His voice was low, almost cautious. I blinked at the question, then forced a small laugh. "Of course not. My children have been living here with me. This is their home, too." He held my gaze for a moment longer, then nodded slowly, lips pressed into a thin line. He didn't say anything else right away, but there was a weight in his silence that settled over the kitchen like a fog. For the first time since this began, a thread of unease tightened in my chest. Whatever he'd found down there, it wasn't just an old pipe or a faulty valve. Later that afternoon, he asked if I could come down with him so he could show me something. His tone was polite but insistent, as if he needed me to see it with my own eyes. I followed him back into the basement, our footsteps creaking on the wooden stairs. He led me past the washer and the stacked boxes to a shadowed corner behind the furnace I rarely bothered with. There, hidden behind a tangle of regular plumbing, sat a metal box about the size of a small oven, clear plastic tubes snaked out of it, vanishing upward into the ceiling. Inside, compartments held liquids in pale green and dark red, like something from a laboratory rather than a home. A small digital screen glowed faintly, its red numbers blinking in a steady rhythm. I stared, trying to make sense of what I was looking at. "What is this? Some kind of air filter?" My voice cracked in the cool basement air. He crouched beside the device, running a finger along one of the tubes before straightening and meeting my eyes. "No. Mrs. Blake," he said quietly but firmly, "this isn't for purifying air. It's built to push chemical substances into your ventilation system. These tubes go directly to your bedroom vents." The words hung in the air, colder than the cement walls around us. "That can't be right," I murmured. "There must be some mistake." His expression hardened. This wasn't installed by accident. Someone designed it, purchased the parts, and took the time to fit it in here. It's been running for a while, 8, maybe 10 months at least. I froze. 8 to 10 months. The exact stretch of time when the headaches had started, when the fatigue had crept in like an invisible fog. My pulse roared in my ears. He stepped closer, lowering his voice even more. "Someone in this house is trying to harm you." I gripped the edge of a shelf to steady myself, the cold metal biting into my palm. His words slid under my skin, setting off a tremor that felt as if it came from my bones. I wanted to reject it, to push it away, but deep down, something inside me had already started to believe. I sat alone in the kitchen after Henry left, the clock ticking louder than usual in the quiet house. His words still echoed in my ears. Someone in this house. I wrapped my hands around a lukewarm cup of tea, trying to calm the tremor running through me. My children would never do this. They couldn't. I repeated it like a prayer, as if saying it enough times might make it true. But memories I had brushed aside came rushing back, each one cutting sharper than the last. Ethan, a few months ago, standing in this very kitchen, his voice firm. "Mom, you should think about selling this place. It's too much for you. A smaller apartment would be easier." At the time, I thought he was being practical, maybe even caring. Now, the words twisted differently in my mind. Then there was Marissa, leaning against the doorframe late one night, her tone casual as she asked, "Do you have enough saved for medical bills? Mom? What about long-term care if something happens?" I'd taken it as concern, the way a daughter worries for her mother, but under the shadow of what Henry had shown me, those questions felt less like care and more like calculation. My chest tightened. I tried to dismiss the thought, but it clung to me, and then the pieces shifted into place with terrifying clarity. The fatigue that clung to me day after day, the dizziness that sent me gripping the counter for balance. When had it begun? I pressed my fingers to my temple, forcing myself to remember. It was right around the time Marissa moved back into the house. The air seemed heavier as I looked around the kitchen. My gaze drifted to the stairs leading up to my bedroom. For months, I had noticed a faint, sharp smell up there at night. Something chemical, almost metallic. I'd written it off as dust in the vents, an old house being an old house. But Henry's words replayed again. "These tubes go directly into your bedroom." A chill spread across my skin. Could it be them? My own children. The ones I had carried, fed, comforted through every scraped knee and broken heart? The thought seared through me like fire, and yet I couldn't push it away. I stayed frozen in my chair, the cup trembling in my hands, tears sliding down my cheeks without warning. My mind whispered the question I was too afraid to voice aloud. If I can't trust my own children, who in this world is left for me to trust? That evening, Henry returned, toolbox in hand, his voice pitched casually as he announced he needed to double-check the lines to make sure everything was sealed properly. My heart pounded as I followed him down the stairs, trying to act normal, hoping neither Ethan nor Marissa would notice. He crouched by the device again, then motioned for me to come closer. His flashlight beam skimmed the pipes, stopping on a small metal valve. Fingerprints smudged the dust, fresh and unmistakable. "They've been back down here," he whispered. "Someone is adjusting this regularly. This isn't the work of an intruder. It's someone with free access, someone who belongs here." The words dug into me. My mind scrambled for other explanations. Maybe a stranger had found a way inside. Maybe there was some mistake. But who else had keys to every door? Who else walked freely through this house without question? Only my children. Only them. I pressed a hand to my chest, trying to steady the thudding there. Henry's face softened as he leaned closer. "I know this is hard. I know it's almost impossible to believe. But I've seen it before. My mother. She died because my brother tampered with her medication. I didn't see it in time. I can't change that, but I can help you now. I won't let the same thing happen to you." His confession struck me with equal parts horror and comfort. I stared at the tangle of tubes, the blinking red digits, the hidden fingerprints, Ethan with his knowledge of systems and equipment, Marissa with her chemistry background. It all snapped together like a lock clicking shut. I gripped Henry's hand, my voice breaking as I forced the words out. If If it really is them, then I'm sleeping inside a death trap built by my own family. The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of the furnace. And for the first time, I felt the house I once called safe close in around me like a cage. After a night of staring at the ceiling and listening to every creak in the house, Henry came back before dawn. His face was grim, his voice stripped of all softness. "You have to leave now," he said quietly but firmly, "before they realize you know." The words rooted me to the floor. "But they're my children," I whispered, my throat tight. "They're not the children you raised anymore," he answered, eyes steady on mine. "Right now, they see you as an obstacle." Something inside me broke at that. I moved mechanically, pulling a canvas tote from the pantry, pretending to pack groceries for a morning errand. My hand shook as I opened the safe hidden behind the pantry shelves, the combination numbers blurring as tears burned in my eyes. One by one, I stuffed documents into the bag, bank papers, insurance policies, the deed to the house. The stairs groaned under my feet as I went up for my coat. Halfway down the hall, Marissa appeared in the doorway of her room. She leaned on the frame, hair mussed from sleep, eyes sharp despite the softness of her voice. "Where are you going, Mom? Do you want me to come with you?" I forced a smile that felt like it might crack my face. "No, sweetheart. Just boring errands at the bank?" She didn't answer right away. Her gaze lingered on me like a hand pressing down on my shoulder. Then she turned back into her room without a word. I walked past as calmly as I could, my palms slick with sweat. Outside, the cold air hit me like a slap. I pulled the coat tighter and glanced toward the driveway. Ethan sat in his car, engine idling, head bent over his phone. Through the rearview mirror, his eyes flicked up and met mine for a fraction of a second. I looked away first, quickening my pace, pretending not to notice him at all. When I slid into Henry's truck, my heart was hammering so hard it blurred the edges of my vision. I had never been so afraid of my own home, of the people who lived inside it. As the house receded in the mirror, the relief I expected didn't come, only a deeper, colder dread. The motel room we found was small and smelled faintly of bleach. The thin curtains let in slivers of morning light, and every shadow outside the window felt like eyes. I sat on the edge of the bed with my bag clutched to my chest, waiting for my phone to buzz. It didn't take long. First Marissa. "Mom, where are you? Why aren't you answering?" Then Ethan. "I've called 10 times. "Where are you?" I typed slowly, fingers trembling. "At the bank. Don't worry," I hit send, hoping the vagueness would buy me time. Hours crawled by. Henry had gone back to the house under the pretense of double-checking his work. When he called, his voice was a rasp of urgency. "I heard them talking about Plan B," he whispered. "If they can't finish what they started, they're going to stage an accident, maybe a fire, maybe a fall down the stairs." I pressed a hand to my mouth to keep from making a sound. "Are you sure?" "They were standing over the device when they said it," he answered. "I took pictures." He sent one over, and my screen filled with the image of a black notebook lying on the kitchen table. One page was open, the handwriting neat and clinical. Week 6, Mom complained dizziness. Week 12, severe fatigue, adjust dosage. My stomach lurched. They hadn't just poisoned me, they documented it, week by week, like a science project. Then my eyes caught the last line at the bottom of the page. Week 20, natural death expected. I was in week 14. The room tilted around me. I gripped the edge of the nightstand, nails biting into the wood. They were watching me like a lab rat, and according to their plan, I should already be slipping toward the end. That evening, another text appeared from an unfamiliar number. We know you're not home. Don't make this harder." I turned the phone toward Henry, my voice barely more than a whisper. "They know. They're already looking for me. I don't have any time left." He glanced toward the window, jaw tight, and for the first time since this began, I saw fear flicker across his face, too. The day crawled by in a blur of half-finished thoughts and shallow breaths. I couldn't eat. Every sound outside the thin motel walls sounded like footsteps coming closer. When the sun finally dipped behind the roofs of the town, Henry insisted we get out for a while, at least to take a walk, to breathe air that didn't smell like bleach and fear. We ended up at a small cafe a few blocks away. My tea went cold on the table, untouched. As we stepped out into the night, the air had turned sharp and metallic, biting against my skin. The street was nearly empty, just a stray car sliding past, headlights carving pale streaks through the dark. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, and the screen glowed with a new message from Ethan. "We know where you are." My heart slammed against my ribs. The words were so simple, but they closed around me like a fist. Henry glanced at the phone, his jaw tightening. "We should head back," he murmured. We turned off the main street, ducking into a narrow side alley we'd passed on the way there. The pavement was slick from an earlier drizzle, glinting under the weak yellow light of a street lamp. Trash bins lined the brick walls, their shadows stretching like fingers across the ground. I hugged my coat tighter around me. It felt like being hunted. Halfway down the alley, a sound stopped us, the scrape of a shoe against gravel. Henry's hand went to my arm instinctively. Ahead, at the mouth of the alley, a figure stepped into the glow of the street lamp. Ethan. His shoulders looked broader in the dim light, his face unreadable. In his hand, a length of metal glinted, a tire iron catching the lamp's glow. He didn't speak. He just stood there, blocking our way out. Before I could react, another shape moved behind us. I spun, and Marissa emerged from the shadows, closing off the other end of the alley. Her hair hung loose, her face pale and calm as porcelain. In her hand, she held a syringe filled with clear liquid that glimmered like ice under the light. My breath hitched. Henry shifted, putting himself slightly in front of me. My eyes darted from one end of the alley to the other. No exit, no help, only them. I swallowed hard, my voice breaking as it left me. "I gave you life. How can you do this to me?" Marissa's eyes flicked up, colder than I'd ever seen them. Her voice was low but steady, each word cutting. "Love doesn't pay debts. Mom." The world tilted. In that moment, I understood that whatever bound us had snapped. The softness in their eyes was gone, replaced by a kind of desperate hunger, a grim resolve. They weren't trying to scare me anymore. They had come to finish what they started. Ethan shifted his grip on the tire iron, the faint clink of metal against his wedding band echoing in the alley. Marissa took a slow step forward, the syringe poised in her hand like a blade. My back hit the damp brick wall. Henry still between us. His shoulders squared, though I could feel him trembling. The smell of garbage and rain mixed with the faint chemical tang wafting from the syringe. I could taste it on my tongue. My pulse roared in my ears, drowning out everything but the sight of their faces. I thought of birthdays, of scraped knees, of whispered lullabies, memories crashing against the image of two strangers cornering me with death in their hands. My mind raced. If they lunged, there would be no time to run, no time to plead. This was the end they had planned for me, written in neat lines in that black notebook, a natural death by week 20. I was nothing more than a line on a page to them now. I forced myself to speak again, though my throat felt like sandpaper. "You don't have to do this. We can fix whatever's broken. We can..." The words faltered. Ethan's eyes flickered. Anger. Shame. Something, but it passed as quickly as it came. Marissa's grip tightened on the syringe. "It's too late," she murmured. The alley shrank around me, the distance between us closing. I could see the tremor in Henry's fists, the way his thumb hovered near his phone in his pocket. A tiny movement, invisible unless you knew to look for it. And then, just as Ethan shifted his weight to step forward, a sound split the night, a rising wail, sharp and unmistakable. Sirens. Close. Their heads snapped toward the noise. The tire iron dipped slightly. Marissa's hand froze mid-air, the syringe trembling. I didn't move, hardly dared to breathe. I didn't know if the sirens were coming for us, if help would arrive in time, or if this was just another cruel trick of fate. All I knew was that in the heartbeat between danger and salvation, everything hung suspended, our lives, our lies, and whatever was left of the family we once were. Red and blue lights slashed across the narrow alley, bouncing off the wet bricks. Sirens wailed and growing louder until the cruiser skidded to a stop at the mouth of the street. Ethan froze mid-step, the tire iron dipping from his grip, while Marissa's hand shook so hard the syringe nearly slipped from her fingers. "Drop it now," the officer's voice boomed, sharp and commanding. Two more moved in, weapons drawn, the sudden presence of authority slicing through the suffocating night. Ethan stepped back quickly, palms raised in false surrender, his eyes darting between me and the police. "This isn't what it looks like," he shouted, voice pitched high with panic. "She's confused. She's sick. His finger jabbed toward Henry. "He's been filling her head with lies." Marissa's voice followed, shrill and cracking. "She's delusional. He's manipulating her." Her hands trembled as she tried to hide the syringe behind her back, but the officers had already seen. Henry's voice cut through their denials, calm, steady, certain. "Check my phone. I have photos." He handed it to the nearest officer, who scrolled quickly. On the screen, images glowed, the black notebook spread open on the kitchen table, the tangle of tubes winding through the basement, the blinking red digits of the timer. Marissa's face blanched. "Those don't prove anything. That system isn't even there anymore. We took it out." She stopped herself, but the words were already out. The officer's eyebrow lifted as her own admission echoed off the alley walls. They pushed Ethan against the hood of the cruiser, snapping cold cuffs around his wrists. He fought back with words, not strength, spitting out excuses. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. We just needed more time. Just 2 more months and—" His mouth clamped shut, but the confession hung in the air like smoke. My knees nearly buckled. 2 more months. The exact phrase from their careful notes. The exact timeline they had written down as if my life were nothing more than an experiment. The officers moved past me, heading straight for the house with Henry's directions. Minutes later, they returned with evidence bagged and sealed. A section of vent pipe, residue swabbed from the metal walls, bottles half filled with chemical solution. The notebook itself lay inside a clear pouch, its neat handwriting damning in its simplicity. Week 20, natural death expected. Marissa thrashed as they pulled her hands behind her back, her face contorted, tears streaking her cheeks. "You don't understand. We had no choice." Her voice cracked, desperation bleeding through. It was supposed to look natural. Nobody would have known. The words turned my stomach. My chest felt hollow, airless. I stared at them. My children, their wrists bound, their lies unraveling under the glow of flashing lights. The 2 people I had carried, raised, comforted through nightmares and heartbreaks, now exposed for what they had become. My hands shook as I pressed them against the wall for balance. A sob clawed up my throat but never escaped. Instead, I felt the truth settle cold and hard inside me. The bond I once believed unbreakable was gone. What stood before me in cuffs were not the children I remembered. They were strangers, driven by greed and desperation, their masks finally torn away. As the officers led them into the cruiser, I caught one last look at their faces. Ethan's jaw set in defiance, Marissa's eyes darting in frantic disbelief. The doors slammed shut, muffling their protests, and the sirens faded into the distance. I stood in the alley, breath clouding in the cold night air, watching the car disappear. My heart splintered under the weight of it all, but one truth was sharp and clear. The children I had loved no longer existed, only their betrayal remained. The trial ended with the hammer of the gavel. Ethan was sentenced to 25 years in prison, Marissa to 20. Neither of them showed remorse. Their words in court were filled with blame, on debt, on circumstance, on everything but themselves. I listened in silence, feeling something inside me finally close for good. I sold the house, letting go of the walls that once held laughter but had turned into a silent trap. I moved north to Maine, into a small apartment by the sea. The salt air cut through the heaviness I'd carried, the crash of waves washing away memories that no longer deserved to follow me. Henry called often, sometimes drove up with fresh coffee and quiet conversation that felt steadier than blood ties. One evening, I sat on the porch. The ocean stretched endless before me. Family isn't bound by blood, I thought. It's the ones who stand with you when everyone else turns away. I opened an old photo album. The last Christmas picture stared back, Ethan and Marissa beaming beside the tree. I closed it gently, set it aside, and lifted my eyes to the horizon. The past had ended. The present had finally begun. I breathed out, heavy with sorrow yet light with freedom. At last, I had survived, and I understood what family truly meant.